The room was cloaked in stillness, the kind of silence that carried weight, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Ethan Cross knelt on the worn wooden floor, his hands trembling as they clasped tightly together. He whispered, "If there is anyone listening, hear me." The words slipped from his lips like fragile smoke, nearly swallowed by the pressing darkness. The single candle before him flickered, its flame stretching unnaturally tall, like it was pulled by invisible hands. A bitter, metallic taste crept into his mouth, making his throat dry. Ethan's eyes darted to the shadows crawling across the cracked plaster walls, their shapes bending and twisting against the light as though alive. His chest tightened, heart hammering as a low vibration shivered through the floorboards. The candle's flame burst suddenly into a cold white blaze, flooding the room with an unholy brilliance. Ethan shielded his eyes, his body shaking. The light carved sharp silver lines into the air, and in its center formed a tall silhouette, shifting, its edges glimmering like molten metal. There were no footsteps, no wind, only the heavy sensation of unseen eyes. Then a voice resonated inside his chest, not in his ears but deep in his bones. "You have been seen." The sound scarred him, marking his very soul, leaving him frozen in both terror and awe. Ethan remained on his knees, his body rigid, his breath caught between disbelief and terror. He whispered, "What are you?" But the words felt small against the vastness pressing in. The figure's form pulsed, its glow bending the air as if reality itself strained beneath its presence. The silence deepened, so heavy it felt like a second skin. Ethan's heartbeat thudded painfully, every pulse echoing like a drum. He thought of all the nights he'd begged for something, anything, to answer him, and now that it had, dread filled him instead of comfort. Shadows seemed to retreat, curling away from the figure, surrendering to its command. Ethan's lips trembled, his prayer shattered in fragments. He whispered, "Am I losing my mind?" But his voice broke under the weight of the unseen. The room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the presence. And deep inside, Ethan knew this moment was not madness. It was recognition. He had been marked, claimed by something he did not yet understand. The glow pressed harder, searing against his skin though it carried no heat. Ethan's throat tightened as though invisible fingers gripped him. He thought of his childhood prayers, words long forgotten now clawing their way back. He whispered, "If this is a dream, let me wake." The presence leaned closer, though it made no motion. It was as if thought itself bent toward him. Ethan's eyes burned with tears he could not understand, his body shaking violently as fear gave way to something deeper, an aching recognition. This was no stranger. This was something that had waited for him, perhaps all his life. His own guilt surged in him like a tide, every lie, every broken promise rising unbidden. The silence was unbearable, but it was not empty. It was judgment. His chest heaved as he felt the weight of it, a force older than time itself pressing into him, making him small, fragile, and utterly seen. The silence finally broke, but not with words. A vibration pulsed through Ethan's bones, and the walls seemed to hum with the sound of eternity. His mind screamed to flee, yet his body remained chained to the floor. He said, "Please, I don't understand." His voice was small, swallowed by the magnitude of the unseen. The figure's glow dimmed slightly, revealing shifting layers like veils of liquid silver. Ethan's breath hitched as he realized this was no ghost, no hallucination. It was something beyond comprehension. His thoughts blurred between awe and despair, his mind unraveling under the weight of revelation. The air pressed tighter, pinning him as though the unseen demanded acknowledgement. His body sagged forward, forehead brushing the cold floorboards. Tears burned his cheeks as he whispered, "What do you want from me?" And deep within he felt the truth. He had already been chosen. The presence lingered, neither advancing nor retreating, its silence louder than thunder. Ethan felt every breath as a struggle, each inhale scraping like glass. His heart thundered as he whispered, "I am not worthy." His body shook violently, as though his soul itself resisted being unveiled. The silhouette shimmered, edges pulsing with silver light, its glow softer now but more piercing. The shadows no longer moved. They bowed, as if even darkness itself acknowledged the figure. Ethan's mind cracked with the weight of it, thoughts splintering between terror and longing. He wanted to run, yet he wanted to stay. A sob broke through his chest as he pressed his palms against the floor. He cried out, "Why me?" But the question carried no answer, only the lingering truth that he was no longer invisible. The silence that followed was the silence of destiny, waiting to unfold. The morning came heavy with silence, though Ethan's mind was far from rested. He sat on the edge of his bed, sweat clinging to his skin as fragments of the night haunted him. His chest felt mocked, as though the voice still vibrated inside his ribs. He whispered, "I saw it. I swear I did." But the pale light streaming through the cracked blinds offered no answers. His hands shook as he rubbed his eyes, replaying the vision again and again, searching for reason in the madness. The room smelled of burnt wax, though the candle was gone. Shadows lingered faintly, as if imprinted on the walls themselves. He stood unsteadily, pacing the floor, trying to convince himself it was all some fever dream. Yet, in his soul, he knew that presence was no trick of exhaustion. It was a call, and it had chosen him. The old wooden church stood quiet, its cracked steeple pointing at the cloud-streaked sky. Ethan pushed open the heavy doors, the groan echoing through the empty nave. He had not been here in years, not since he had turned his back on faith. Dust floated in the sunbeams, cutting across the pews. The scent of old wood and wax clung to the silence. Father Gabriel Hayes emerged from the shadows, his robes worn but his eyes sharp with knowing. He said, "Your face is troubled, Ethan." His voice carried patience, but beneath it was weight. Ethan faltered, ashamed, his voice low. "I saw something. It spoke to me." The words cracked like dry wood. Gabriel's gaze held him, unwavering, as though he had been expecting this confession all along. Gabriel motioned for Ethan to sit, his hands steady as he set a candle alight on the altar. The small flame danced, casting warm light against his lined face. "You have been marked," Gabriel said, his tone both gentle and grave. Ethan shook his head, his voice breaking. "I'm no prophet. I'm no saint. I'm nothing." Gabriel leaned closer, the candle's glow reflecting in his eyes. "The divine does not seek the worthy. It seeks the willing." Ethan's chest tightened, guilt flooding through him. Every wrong, every selfish act gnawed at him as if summoned by Gabriel's words. "But what if I can't bear it?" he whispered, trembling. Gabriel's silence in response was not empty. It was the silence of acceptance, leaving Ethan with the weight of choice. The sound of footsteps broke the stillness, echoing across the nave. Olivia Carter, a doctor in her late 30s, rational and precise, stepped into the light. Her coat was crisp, her eyes sharp with doubt. "I knew I'd find you here," she said, folding her arms. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. "You wouldn't believe me," he muttered, not meeting her gaze. She smirked slightly, though not unkindly. "You're right. I don't." She glanced at Gabriel. "You're filling his head with this again?" Gabriel's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. Ethan stood, fists clenching at his sides. "I saw it, Olivia. It wasn't a dream." For the first time her expression faltered, doubt flickering for just a moment before she quickly masked it with cold reason. The tension thickened between them, silence stretching like a held breath. Gabriel's eyes shifted between Ethan and Olivia, his voice steady. "The path of faith is not walked by sight, but by surrender." Olivia scoffed, her tone sharp. "Faith doesn't explain visions, or shadows that move against light." Ethan stepped forward, his voice shaking but certain. "It wasn't shadows. It was something real. It chose me." The words startled him as much as they did her, the certainty in them unfamiliar. Olivia's brow furrowed, her rational mind wrestling against the memory of that fleeting doubt. Gabriel placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder, grounding him. Then your journey begins here, he said softly. The air in the church seemed heavier, as though listening. Ethan walked through the narrow streets at dusk, the orange light of the setting sun painting long shadows across the crumbling stone walls. Every sound felt amplified, the rustle of leaves, the echo of distant footsteps. He pressed his hand to his chest where the voice had marked him, the memory still alive beneath his skin. He whispered, "Why me?" His voice caught in the air, weak and uncertain. A figure appeared from the alley, Michael Turner, a man in his early 40s, his eyes worn from a past he could not escape. Michael said, "You're not the only one who carries it." Ethan froze, confusion rushing over him. Michael stepped closer, his voice low, rough with regret. "I know the weight of being chosen, and I know the ruin it leaves behind." Ethan's heart thudded, the tension between belief and fear pulling him apart. Michael leaned against the wall, shadows cutting across his face as though divided by guilt and truth. He said, "I was called once too, but I failed. I lost everything I cared for." Ethan's breath caught as he studied the man before him, broken, yet alive. "You survived," Ethan said softly, though the words sounded more like a question. Michael's jaw tightened, his eyes clouded. "Survival isn't the same as redemption." Ethan stepped closer, desperate for understanding. "Then what do I do?" Michael's gaze fixed on him, piercing and sharp. "You walk the path, even when it tears you apart." The weight of the words settled heavy, wrapping Ethan in dread, forcing him to confront the cost of what lay ahead. The sound of quick footsteps broke the tension, and Olivia Carter appeared from the corner, her face sharp, her expression skeptical. She said, "So, this is where you've run off to, Ethan." Her arms crossed, her stance rigid. Ethan turned, frustration burning. "I'm not running. I'm searching." Michael's eyes shifted to Olivia, his voice low. "She doesn't believe, does she?" Olivia's tone cut like steel. "I believe in evidence, in science, not in shadows and whispers." Ethan's face hardened. "Then explain why I hear it still, every time I breathe." Olivia faltered, her lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. The silence between them was heavier than any denial she could muster. The wind shifted suddenly, cold and biting, carrying with it a low murmur like voices hidden in the dark. Ethan shivered, glancing around. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, creeping along the walls. Olivia stiffened, her rational certainty faltering. "Do you hear that?" she whispered despite herself. Michael's face tightened, his voice barely audible. "It's beginning again." Ethan's pulse raced, his body frozen in both terror and strange recognition. The air pressed down, suffocating. Olivia's hands curled into fists, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "This isn't possible," she said, her tone breaking. Ethan whispered, "It's not possible, but it's real." The words lingered in the heavy air as the shadows thickened, bending toward them. The shadows converged suddenly, forming a shape that towered over them, not solid yet suffocating. Ethan staggered back, his breath stolen. Olivia's rationality shattered, her voice cracking. "What is that?" Michael's voice was steady, though fear flickered in his eyes. "The darkness that hunts us." The form loomed, shifting and formless, its edges writhing like smoke. Ethan's soul ached with the familiarity of it, as though it had always waited for him. He whispered, "It knows me." The weight of the truth sank deep, binding him to the moment. Olivia reached for Ethan's arm, trembling. "Then we have to run." But Ethan did not move. His eyes locked with the abyss before him, and he knew running would never save him. The night air clung to Ethan's skin as he stood outside the church, the silence broken only by the rustle of leaves. His chest burned, the mark inside him alive like a second heartbeat. Michael lingered nearby, his gaze sharp. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly. Ethan's voice trembled. "It hasn't left me. It's inside me." Michael stepped closer, his tone dark. "It will never leave. Once it calls, it owns you." Ethan shook his head, fighting against the pull of despair. No, there has to be more than this weight. Michael's eyes hardened, shadows across his scarred face. The truth isn't freedom. It's chains. Ethan staggered back, horror rising as he realized Michael's words carried more than warning. They carried confession. Ethan's breath caught as Michael turned away, his voice raw with regret. I failed once. I let it consume me, and people died because of it. The words struck like a blade, and Ethan felt his stomach twist. What did you do? Ethan whispered, but Michael's eyes lowered, refusing to answer. The silence itself told the story. Olivia approached, her face pale as she caught fragments of their exchange. You're hiding something, she said sharply, suspicion flashing in her gaze. Michael's jaw clenched, his hands trembling despite his composure. Ethan's mind reeled, pieces of a darker truth sliding into place. The figure he thought was an ally might be a warning in human form. Michael finally muttered, some truths are poison, but once you taste them, you can't spit them out. The church doors creaked open suddenly, golden candlelight spilling into the night. Father Gabriel Hayes stepped out, his expression grave, his presence steady. Enough secrets, he said, voice carrying like a command. Ethan turned to him desperately. Then tell me the truth. What is this mark? Gabriel's eyes softened with sorrow. It is not just a call. It is a covenant. You are bound. Olivia's face hardened, anger flaring. You knew this, and you let him suffer without answers? Gabriel's gaze lingered on her, unwavering. Sometimes answers come with greater pain than questions. Ethan's body shook, the words cutting deeper than any silence could. The weight of inevitability pressed down, leaving him both terrified and bound to a path he could not escape. Ethan's voice broke as he shouted, I didn't ask for this! His fists shook at his sides, veins straining against his skin. Gabriel stepped forward, calm yet resolute. The chosen never ask. They are chosen because they must carry what others cannot. Olivia turned away, her rational mind struggling. This is madness, she muttered, though fear betrayed her strength. Michael's head lowered, his voice bitter. Hell break just like I did? Gabriel's sharp gaze fixed on Michael. You broke because you ran. If he stands, he may yet survive. Ethan's knees weakened, the words crashing over him. His life once his own, now twisted into a story he had no power to escape. He whispered, Then who am I now? The wind shifted again, colder, sharper, carrying with it whispers that none of them spoke. Ethan's eyes widened as the shadows lengthened unnaturally, crawling toward them from the edges of the churchyard. Gabriel's face darkened. It knows, he murmured. Olivia grabbed Ethan's arm, her skepticism finally cracking. Tell me you see it too. Ethan's voice was low, steady despite the terror. I see it. It's been waiting. Michael stepped back, his fear visible, his earlier warnings alive in the air around them. The shadows pulsed, shaping into something almost human, yet wholly unnatural. The air grew heavy, pressing on their lungs. Ethan whispered, It's the truth, isn't it? This is what I was called for. No one answered, for the silence was answer enough. The air in the churchyard thickened as the shadows condensed, taking on a form that flickered between solid and smoke. Ethan's knees weakened, but he refused to look away. Olivia clutched his arm tighter, her voice breaking. Tell me I'm imagining this. Ethan's voice was low, trembling yet steady. No, you see it now. Gabriel stepped forward, lifting a worn crucifix, his tone calm but firm. It reveals itself when faith is tested. Michael's face twisted in dread. Faith didn't save me. His words carried venom, dripping with failure. The shadow pulsed, stretching taller edges crackling with silver and black. Ethan's soul burned with recognition, and he whispered, It knows me. The others froze, for in that moment the figure's gaze shifted, not to Gabriel or Olivia, but directly to him. The shadow surged forward, its voice cutting through their minds rather than the air. He belongs to me. Ethan's chest clenched, his breath caught as the words branded his soul. Gabriel raised his voice. You will not claim him. He is marked by the light. Olivia's body shook, her rational world crumbling as tears filled her eyes. This isn't possible, she whispered, her tone more plea than protest. Michael stepped back into the darkness, his jaw set in defeat. I told you, you can't escape it. Ethan's hands clenched into fists as he shouted. I will not be yours. The shadow shuddered, its form twisting violently, silver fire burning at its edges. The ground quaked beneath them, the church groaning as though the earth itself bore witness. The shadow hissed, its form splintering into streams of black smoke that coiled around Ethan. His body stiffened, choking on the weight of its presence. Gabriel pressed forward, his voice steady. Resist it. Speak truth against it. Ethan's voice cracked as he forced the words out. I am not lost. I am not yours. The smoke recoiled, hissing like fire doused in water. Olivia stared, disbelief battling the terror in her eyes. Michael shook his head, whispering, You won't last. But Ethan's chest rose and fell with new strength, the mark inside him burning like a brand of light. For the first time, he felt not just chosen, but defiant. He roared into the darkness, You cannot take me. The air trembled with his defiance, breaking the night's silence. The shadow convulsed, its form flickering between power and weakness, light bleeding from its wounds. Ethan gasped, his knees buckling, but the fire inside him burned brighter. Gabriel's face lit with fierce pride. Yes, Ethan, stand in the light. Olivia's rational shell cracked entirely as she whispered, It's real, all of it. Michael staggered forward, torn between warning and admiration. Don't do what I did, don't let it win. The shadow's voice rang like a scream carried through stone. You are mine, and I will break you. Ethan raised his face, tears glistening, but his words rang louder. No, you don't own me, I choose. The ground split slightly, dust rising as though the earth itself responded to the clash. The shadow collapsed inward, its form unraveling like smoke, torn apart by a storm. The silver glow that mocked Ethan pulsed outward, forcing it back into the night. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Ethan's ragged breath. Gabriel lowered the crucifix, his expression solemn. The battle has begun. Olivia clutched her coat tightly, tears streaming, the skeptic shattered into a believer. This changes everything, she whispered. Michael dropped to his knees, his face twisted with guilt and awe. I couldn't do it. But he did. Ethan staggered, nearly falling, his voice hoarse but steady. It isn't over. It's only beginning. His words lingered in the cold air, a vow carved into the silence. The night was still, but every soul present knew nothing would ever be the same. The storm broke over the churchyard, lightning tearing across the sky in violent streaks. Rain poured, soaking Ethan as he stood at the threshold of the old stone church, his body trembling yet unyielding. Olivia shouted through the downpour, We have to get inside. Her eyes were wide, her fear plain, but Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on the shifting shadows crawling up the church walls. Gabriel's voice boomed through the thunder. This is the test. Do not turn away. Michael's face was pale, his lips quivering with the weight of memory. Ethan pressed his hand against his chest, the mark glowing faintly beneath his soaked shirt. He whispered, I'm ready. The words sounded fragile, but in them was a strength he had never felt before. A vow that lightning itself seemed to echo. Inside the church, candles flickered violently as wind forced its way through shattered windows. The shadow filled the nave, larger than before, its edges razor-sharp with silver fire. Gabriel raised his crucifix high, voice steady despite the chaos. You will not claim him. The entity hissed, its form pressing closer, bending the air itself. Olivia grabbed Ethan's arm, her fear breaking into anger. You can't fight this, it's too strong. Ethan pulled away, his eyes locked on the shifting form. Then let it come. If this is what I was called for, I won't hide. Michael shouted, "It will destroy you." But Ethan's voice grew stronger. "No, it will face me." His words rang through the church, defiant against the storm. The shadow lunged, its form tearing across the nave like a tidal wave of black fire. Ethan braced himself, every nerve alive with terror and resolve. The mark on his chest burned brighter, spreading light through his veins until his skin glowed. He cried out, his voice mixing with the roar of thunder, "You will not have me." The impact hit, shaking the church to its foundation. Candles shattered, wood splintered, and glass rained down. Olivia screamed, shielding her face. Michael fell to his knees, covering his head. Gabriel stood firm, his eyes blazing. Ethan's body convulsed under the force, yet the glow inside him pushed outward, clashing with the darkness in a blinding collision of light and shadow. The church shook violently, its beams groaning as the ceiling cracked. Ethan stood in the center, surrounded by a storm of swirling shadow and light. His voice trembled, yet carried conviction. "I am not yours. I am chosen." The entity's voice thundered through them all. "Then you will break." Ethan cried out, tears streaming, his body straining against the pull. Olivia's eyes filled with awe as she whispered, "He's fighting it." Michael pressed his hands against the ground, his voice hoarse. "He's stronger than I ever was." Gabriel stepped closer, his crucifix blazing in reflection of Ethan's glow. "Stand, Ethan. Do not falter." Ethan roared, his light surging outward, cracking the very stones beneath him. The final clash came with a sound like mountains splitting. Ethan's light burst outward in a wave, colliding with the shadow in a blinding explosion. The church's windows shattered, shards raining in golden sparks. The entity screamed, its form unraveling into smoke and ash, pulled back into the darkness from which it came. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping, his body glowing faintly like embers after fire. Olivia ran to him, her face streaked with tears, whispering, "You're alive." Michael bowed his head, a sob breaking free. Gabriel's voice rose steady, filled with reverence. "He has stood where few could. He has faced the dark and endured." Ethan lifted his head slowly, his voice cracked but resolute. "It isn't over, but neither am I." The storm had passed, leaving the church in ruins, its walls fractured and its windows shattered. Ethan sat on the broken steps, his body weak but his eyes steady. Olivia knelt beside him, her hand on his arm, whispering, "You shouldn't even be alive." He gave a faint smile, weary yet resolute. "I wasn't meant to survive. I was meant to stand." Gabriel stood nearby, his robe torn, his crucifix lowered, his expression one of reverence. "The mark does not choose lightly," he said with solemnity. Michael lingered at the edge of the rubble, shame etched into his features, his voice shaking. "You did what I couldn't. You didn't run." Ethan's gaze lifted to the sky, the clouds parting, stars emerging faintly. His chest glowed with the faint embers of light, steady and eternal. Inside the broken nave, the candles had burned down to pools of wax, their smoke curling into the fractured beams of moonlight. Ethan forced himself to stand, his body trembling with exhaustion. Olivia reached for him, but he waved her hand gently aside. "I have to walk this path myself," he said softly. Gabriel's voice carried across the silence, calm but heavy. This night was not victory. It was only the beginning of a greater war. "And sorry how, Doc knew." Michael's eyes glistened, his shame still raw. "I failed when it came for me. But maybe helping you will be my redemption." Ethan turned toward him, his expression weary but compassionate. "Then, walk with me." The words carried no judgment, only an invitation, a grace Michael had never known. The group stepped outside into the silence of the night, the air crisp with the scent of rain. The ruined steeple loomed above them, cracked but unfallen. Olivia looked skyward, her voice unsteady. "I can't explain what I saw tonight. I've built my life on facts, not faith, but nothing about this was a lie." Ethan turned to her, his face soft with understanding. Faith doesn't erase reason. It asks you to see beyond it. Her lips quivered, the last of her skepticism giving way to awe. Michael lowered his head, whispering, "We are all prisoners until we choose." Gabriel's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "And tonight, choice has been made." The stars shimmered brighter, as though the heavens themselves acknowledged the moment. They walked together through the quiet streets, their footsteps echoing against stone. Ethan led, his posture no longer that of a man broken, but of one carrying purpose. Olivia walked close behind, her eyes fixed on him, a new respect softening her features. Michael followed, each step heavy, but his shoulders less burdened than before. Gabriel walked last, his gaze lifted as though watching unseen forces. Ethan whispered, "I thought I was lost, but maybe being lost was the only way I could be found." The words hung in the cool air, striking each of them differently, yet binding them in shared truth. The silence that followed was not empty, but full, charged with the weight of a journey just beginning. At the edge of town, Ethan stopped, turning to face the others. His face glowed faintly in the moonlight, his voice steady though tired. "It isn't finished. The darkness will come again." Olivia stepped closer, her eyes unwavering. "Then we'll face it together." Michael's breath caught, a tear slipping free as he nodded. "I won't run this time." Gabriel placed a hand over his heart, his voice low and reverent. "Then it begins anew, not in fear, but in faith." Ethan turned toward the horizon, where dawn's first light crept across the sky. His chest burned softly, steady as a heartbeat, a reminder of the night's trial. He whispered to the rising sun, "You have been seen." The words, once haunting, now rang as a vow.